Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has claimed victory in the Philippines presidential election. He's vowed to be a leader for all Filipinos and calls for national unity. Marcos Jr. has garnered over 31 million votes, with 98% of the ballots counted. Now, that's more than double the tally of his nearest rival, Leni Robredo. It's projected to be one of the strongest mandates for a Philippine president in decades. The win is an astonishing reversal in fortunes for the Marcos family. Mr. Marcos is the first presidential candidate to win an outright majority of votes since his dictator father was toppled from power and the family chased into exile back in 1986. Meanwhile, China says that it will continue to work together with the Philippines under Mr. Marcos. Its embassy in Manila released a statement saying Beijing remains committed to a friendship with its neighbor and will focus on post-COVID growth and expanding cooperation between both countries. Well, for more, Buena Bernal joins us live now from Manila. Buena, Marcos Jr. is seen as a polarizing figure despite the landslide win that we saw. He says he's going to be a leader for all Filipinos. How's he going to bring the country together after such a divisive election?
There is a cloud of uncertainty, and a lot of academics say they are at a loss as to how this campaign message of unity of the presumed next president of the Philippines and the late dictator's son, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., would operationalize that. That message of unity resonated with a lot of Filipinos who have been tired of extreme political bickering that has traditionally hounded Philippine politics. But his campaign speeches, as well as the selective interviews that he's done, has not really fleshed out how he will unite the warring factions in terms of political stances in the Philippines. So it's a wait and see. And the activist movement in the Philippines is really, strong and has pushed for a battle cry of quote unquote never forget when it comes to the atrocities of martial law under Mr. Marcos Jr.'s father's regime, that 21 years where we saw oppositionists jailed and tortured, and with protections against warrantless arrests lifted at that time. Innocent bystanders could have easily been part of that count. And we see this never forget dynamic the world over, where collective national trauma usually necessitated intergenerational responsibility and accountability. In 2008, we saw then Australia Prime Minister Kevin Rudd apologize in behalf of the Australian government for the mistreatment of the Aboriginal community, whose children were forcibly integrated into mainstream society until the 60s. A more recent example, the United States returning the war trophies called the Balanghiga Bells, an acknowledgement of the massacre that occurred in 1901 when U.S. troops burned down a town here in the Philippines. And martial law ended 30 years ago, but there has been no apology or acknowledgement from the Marcos family. So in the name of unity, the question is, what will Mr. Marcos Jr. do to sort of heal all these government actions in the past that have sown discord? How will he pacify this outrage?
Well, the Filipino people have a lot to weigh in the wake of this election win by Marcos Jr. Buena, thank you very much for that. Buena Bernal in Manila.